Hello. So earlier on in your lecture, you were saying that due process past the 14th Amendment has been equally distributed to all groups across America.
No. I didn't say that in practice it has. I said the concept of due process is dedicated to the proposition that people should be treated as individuals. Obviously, segregation and racism and criminal justice up until the Civil Rights Act would suggest that on a practical level it was not equally distributed, obviously.
Okay, so in idea, but in practice, it was, you agree that it was not equally distributed to all groups across America?
Sure.
Okay, so then how is that in opposition to critical race theory that teaches that these institutions have been used to prosecute certain groups differently than others have been prosecuted?
Because that's not what critical race theory teaches. What critical race theory teaches is that supposedly colorblind institutions like due process of law are cover for racism as an institution. Due process of law is a problem because it is not because it is a good concept badly applied or improperly applied. It's because it is in and of itself a discriminatory concept. Right? This is what they say about capitalism also. Right? Free market economies are inherently discriminatory. They are covers for institutions of power. That's the critique. The critique is that due process of law, in and of itself, the idea of treating people individually ignores key components about human beings, namely how they are seen racially by other human beings, and thus due process of law is not enough to guarantee that people are treated equally or can be treated equally. I disagree. I think due process of law is an excellent guarantee, and straying away from that guarantee has been the problem with regard to due process of law, not the actual guarantee itself.
Okay. Sorry, my voice is a bit gone. So then would you agree not banning critical race theory in public, like in the theory that they are covers, but would you be a proponent of having the education that these institutions have been used to attack other minority groups across America and that it has had historic scars that are still we still see today?
So I wouldn't say that the institutions have been used to abuse I wouldn't say due process of law has been used to abuse minorities. I would say that people have refused to implement due process of law because they wanted to abuse minorities, of course. And of course you'd have to teach about that. I mean, that's the entire history of segregation and the subjugation of black Americans up to the Civil Rights Act, for sure. Of course. And this is why it's such a lie when people say that if you don't want to teach critical race theory, you don't want to teach history. I'm fine with teaching every ugly part of American history. What I'm not fine with is the idea that the foundational ideas of the United States of America, the notion that we are created equal before God with certain inalienable rights and that government was instituted in order to protect these rights, I disagree with the fundamental idea that these were a cover for power designed in order to subjugate black Americans. I think that's a lie, and I think it's deleterious to teach that to kids.
Okay, so I don't want to misinterpret your position, but it's your belief. Tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, okay? It's your belief that America is fundamentally a skillsocracy, as you call it, as opposed to a meritocracy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then how...
Because I don't connect moral merit with intellect. People are born...
Yeah, okay, I get that, nice. That's good. My question is, how do you explain the fact that the vast majority of American inequality is caused by the people who you know, the neighborhoods you grew up in, the amount of wealth your parents have, and thousands and thousands and thousands of other, whether you believe that race is involved or not, but thousands of other non-skill-based factors that are integral to moving ahead in the American system?
So I don't think that that's true primarily. What I think is that all of those things have an impact on the skills that manifest in the marketplace. No question. But what the market measures is at the point of the skills. It's not measure. If there's a skilled person who's coming from an impoverished background where there's a lot of single motherhood and crime, for example, and that person has high skills, that person is going to do fine. Okay, but the problem is that all of those things can contribute to a lack of skills. Right? This is part of my argument, and the only way to actually alleviate that problem is to change the cultural milieu that makes it very difficult for people to achieve a certain level of skills in particular communities. Single motherhood makes it very difficult, for example, for kids to grow up in an environment where they have a solid family home, where they're studying a lot at home, where education is of primary value as opposed to just getting through the day crime-free, for example, and without being victimized by neighbors. High crime areas, right? All of these things are things that we can alleviate, and I think that we should alleviate them. These are real problems to people fully developing their skills. The point that I'm making is that the system of economics is not punishing people for their upbringing, it's punishing them for lack of skills, which may in fact be an effect of their upbringing. Right? But that does not mean that primarily the skillsocracy is punishing people for their environment or for their race. It is punishing them for the fact that when it comes time for them to go to the job market, they don't have the same skills as the person next to them. So the question becomes not, how do we get rid of the skillsocracy? The question becomes, how do we get rid of the obstacles to people who could be more skilled becoming more skilled? And that means creating cultural institutions that matter. It means creating communities. It means trying to ensure that people have a father and a mother in the home, trying to make sure that people can live in safe neighborhoods where there are thriving communities, where there are jobs available. Right? That would effectuate a better opportunity set to enter the skillsocracy. But what I see is people attacking the distribution of reward at the skills level as opposed to attacking the underlying problem, which creates a lot of the inequalities you're talking about.
Yeah. I'd rather... Can I talk? Yeah. Oh, no, you're fine. Yeah, so I was wondering, you believe that things like single motherhood, things like growing up in high crime areas are inherently cultural rather than to do with any institutions or any inequalities that are part of American society institutionally?
No, I think that history has a long tail. But I think that the only way that you fix that is by changing the incentive structure for individuals right now. So I think that you can blame the amount of crime in a particular community on a long history of disinvestment in that community 50, 60 years ago. I don't think it's going to change a damn thing. And I don't think pouring money into the community is necessarily the solution. I think if you're looking at high crime levels, I think the best solution is you need more cops on the ground to stop the crime. This is what's going to allow people to invest in the area and provide more jobs. And I think that trying to spend all of your time, the question is, are we trying to diagnose a problem that is solvable, or are we trying to just describe the history of the problem? If we want to describe the history of the problem, that's fine, but using that as a substitute for a practical solutions-based approach to problems is a political mistake. One is the study of historians, the other is the study of politicians and political actors that ought to actually be applied in real life.
When you have a solution like affirmative action, or you have a solution like benefiting people from lower income communities, and I know obviously there's a difference between affirmative action on the racial level and affirmative action on the economic level, you think that government policy should have no role in alleviating those inequalities, even though government policy purportedly in the past, even though I would argue currently, created those inequalities in the first place?
I think that any time the government attempts to remedy past discrimination by the use of current discrimination, all they are doing is effectuating discrimination and undermining the skillsocracy that allows for positive externalities, yes.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
Doing okay. How are you?
Great. How come you claim to be 5'9" even though you're like 5'5"?
I don't know. How tall are you?
5'9".
You're 5'9"?
I'm actually 5'9".
Okay, come over here. Let's see. I'll be honest, I planned it. I'm waiting years to do that.
Hi, how are you? My question is regarding two very high-profile court cases going on right now, the Ahmaud Arbery trials and the Kyle Rittenhouse trials. And my question is, what do you believe would be the outcome of these trials and why?
Okay, so I think that there's what will happen and what should happen. I'm not going to try and predict what will happen because you cannot predict what juries are going to do. What should happen, Rittenhouse should be acquitted. He clearly acted in self-defense. That doesn't mean that I would send my 17-year-old over to Kenosha, Wisconsin in order to protect property and provide medical aid to people, but it does mean that the shootings that he committed were in self-defense. The evidence is pretty much as clear as day on that one. And the prosecutor has no case, and frankly, he's making a fool of himself. He looks like he got his law degree for turning in the tops of Cracker Jack boxes. In the Arbery case, the main question in the Arbery case is going to come down to, legally speaking, whether the McDaniels, who are the defendants in this particular case, whether they had the capacity under the citizens arrest law of Georgia to arrest Arbery. So there was some testimony last week that a couple of weeks before they went after Arbery, they went to this house that Arbery had been allegedly inside of, this construction site, and tools had been stolen from there and all this. They went there with a local cop, apparently, and the local cop was speaking to them about how there was somebody who looked exactly like Arbery who'd been inside stealing things. right? And so what this does, it provides the predicate for the notion. They have to, that if they get a call that somebody is stealing things and that person matches Arbery's description, and the cop in the tape says it's possible he's stealing things, it could be a misdemeanor, it could be a felony. Once it's a felony, you can effectuate a citizen's arrest. So the question is going to be whether that citizen's arrest was lawful or not, the attempted citizen's arrest. Because once you get down to the end of it, right, the end of it where they're roadblocking him and they're trying to keep him from running away, and Arbery runs between the cars, now you essentially have a case of almost mutual self-defense, right? It's actually really a terrible case in which Arbery sees these guys chasing him in trucks. Why is he going to pull over, right? And so he tries to run. He goes for the gun, they shoot him. So from their perspective, they're trying to give a citizen's arrest, they have to shoot him in self-defense. From his perspective, he's trying to run away, and they're blocking him and trying to falsely imprison him, and so he's acting in self-defense. So the only way to solve that legal conundrum is whether they were, in fact, under the belief that they were attempting to arrest him, a citizen's arrest, and they had good cause. Like, it has to be by the preponderance of the evidence, like 51%, 49% standard. If they had a 51 to 49% probability of the evidence that he was committing a felony and that they could arrest him, then they could be acquitted. So that's the legal issue. That's what it's going to come down to.
Considering that citizen's arrest is a widely outdated law, do you consider that it should be reformed?
It's difficult to reform citizen's arrest because, again, there are just so many areas where the cops are not available. I mean, what I would like is to make it so that citizen's arrest is not something that anybody really wants to do because the cops are so available that you just call them. Right, and by the way, this is what happens in low crime, high income areas. Frankly, there are a lot of cops available. There's a lot of security. You don't see a lot of people running around trying to effectuate citizens' arrests in those areas. You typically have somebody calling a police officer.
That's true.
Sorry, one last question is: do you believe that Rittenhouse traveled to Kenosha with the intent of stirring trouble or not?
I think that by the available evidence, he went there with the intent of providing medical aid and brought the gun because he thought the trouble might break out or could break out. I don't think that he went there to shoot anybody, if that's the question. And I think the prosecution's case that he went there to shoot somebody is undermined by pretty much every single fact on the ground, including his own behavior that night.
You know, I love how Ben handled the situation, you understand? Like the last guy that asked him question. You don't take law into your hands by arresting somebody, citizen arresting someone. You end up, you just call the police. And I've seen it several times, where you are confused or something is happening. The best person to do is to call the right authority, you understand, to do their job, because that is why the state is paying them. They're paying them to handle situations like this. So I think, for that, I agree with Ben Shapiro. And let's go back to the guy that wanted to, that was doubting his height. I feel that was the highlight of the show, you understand? At least Ben was like, okay, if you doubt me, the best thing is walk up on stage. If you are taller than me, then I admit I'm wrong. If you are not, then I'm right. And I could see that they were both at the same height. So Ben spoke about skillocracy and is a meritocracy. So I think I would surely advocate for the skill part of it, whereby you learn something instead of you to give people or keep on giving them. They get used to you giving them, but when you empower them by teaching them a skill, they're able to fend for themselves. That is how children are, when a child gets to a certain age, the parents start sending the child to school, making sure that the school fees have been paid, making sure that the right teachers have, the child is being taught the right way, because they're trying to give this child a skill. So depending on whatever you decide to study, accounting, medicine, engineering, you're acquiring a skill. So that is it. You empower them. You make them to be independent instead of depending on you. And I think that is why Charlie is saying American is a country that favors skillocracy more than meritocracy. And I love that. You understand? You don't need to just keep on getting things based on merit. You need to put in the work. You understand? So this is lovely. I love this, and I want to see more videos from Ben. If you have any recommendation, let me know in the comment section. If it is your first time visiting the channel, click on the subscribe button. Thanks for watching, and remember this.